Hi, it's Zoe, your friendly neighborhood Canadian Australian leadership expert. And today we are looking back and looking up. We're going to look back at some of the key highlights from this season on leading in complexity. And then we're looking up because this next season's topic is vertical development. So let's do it.
Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we share all things people stuff in leadership. Learn from leaders who have done the hard yards and learn from experience. Hear from expert authors about the latest insights from culture to strategy and messy people dynamics. Get tips and insights from multiple award-winning author and leadership expert herself, Zoe Routh. Now, on with the show.
Hello, so I am back with you from the bunker. My favorite place to connect with you, that's for sure. Gee, it would be nice to have a face in front of me to talk to. At the moment, I stare at my microphone. But I imagine you sitting there or working out or walking or whatever it is that you're doing while you're listening to this podcast. And I feel grateful for that. So I am so grateful for you tuning in and listening each week to the interviews that I bring you and also the personal insights from the interviews and the reflection that I'm doing. So yeah, heaps of gratitude to you. And if you are stuck in lockdown like so many people are right now in Australia and across the world, then my heart goes out to you too. I do hope that you get through it okay and that this podcast brings you a little bit of joy and sunshine along the way. So, updates from me. Not so much joy and happiness and sunshine for me. Things are pretty good, I have to say. Though, since my back has relatively stopped hurting, it's still a bit twingy, my feet hurt now. So I'm now dealing with another old person's body problem. So I'm getting an ultrasound on my feet to see what we can do about the plantar fasciitis and all the other rigmarole that's happening down there. That's not a very exciting update, is it? Exciting, let's try with that one, is my novel. So yeah, I got a whole bunch of feedback from the editor, which was like a 6 or 7 page essay. And that was, confronting. Pause. It was a pause. It was press pause. Let's rethink a few things. He's excellent. So he's given me some really constructive stuff to wrestle with. He reassured me that I do have a story to work with, and that's good. And he also says he wants to keep working with me, so also good. Bad news is I haven't done any writing since I got that. I've been more pondering and reflecting and waking up at 2 a.m. going, okay, what am I going to do about this particular line of the story? So I'm not sure if other novelists have this same drama. I am now in procrastination mode and doing everything I can to avoid it, but getting ready to start jumping in again because the story needs to come out. It just wants to come through my fingers, out onto the electronic page and into your hands. And my promise is that I want it done by Christmas. So, that's my intention. We'll see how we go. Oh, speaking of writing, I have produced a free report for you. It's called How to Spot and Handle Difficult Behavior in the Workplace. It takes a bit of a deep dive into the 4 devils of people stuff out of my book and with some handy-dandy tips to help you deal with, the trickier stuff of people stuff. You can find that on my website at zoerouth.com, like Zoe, Z-O-E, Routh, like mouth with an R, .com. And click on resources and you can access that free report right there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. On another personal update, I've been fasting and taking cold showers. So my trainer has me on a new regime, which involves fasting. So I did a 24-hour fast. Well, ended up being a 21-hour fast because I cracked on the weekend, and fasting every day until about 8 or 9 a.m. So doing a bit of intermittent fasting there to help take control of my blood sugar and get my body back on track. So it's been all over the place this year with the back injury and so on. So yeah, that's actually quite enjoyable. I've become accustomed to the cold showers and feel really good after. If you've had experiences with cold showers, love to hear about it. All right, so let's get into the juicy content of this episode. I promised looking backwards, and we had such an amazing lineup of speakers on the podcast this last season. I love the topic of leading complexity, well, because it's complex and nuanced, and my intention was to help us discover new ways of looking at things that would help us make sense of what's going on. So we had Christina Gerakites. Wow, she was the latest one, I think, or second latest one. I felt so inspired listening to her, and the work at Singularity University just blows my mind. And it's the place to go where you can look for exponential technologies and how the future is being created right in front of us. So it's a nice community to be part of and to be across some of the developments there. We had John Davis, and wasn't that a great conversation? From him, I learned the promise of meditation and how it can help reshape our minds, our bodies, and our results. That's helped me recommit to my meditation practice in a deeper way. I still meditate every day, but I'm just doing it with more intent now. We had Dr. Amy Silver, who's a gem. And from her, we learned about mastering our mind, basically mastering our inner voice and how we make sense of the world or don't make sense of the world, specifically on how we make friends and with fear and bring fear to the party and ask, what is it doing for us? So some fabulous personal perspective pieces in there from her. Luca Perry, I love that interview too. From him, I learned about leaning into difference. And I love his story about his first job out on country and being a school teacher there and really learning about other people's perspective and realities and diving into that. So that was a wonderful conversation. Nick Tebbe, what a purpose-driven leader. I loved his story. It was very uplifting about how he decided in looking at his newborn son that he wanted to make decisions that he would feel proud of when he gifted the world to his son, basically. So what world was he going to give to his son, and his commitment to being a leader that makes a good difference. Kate Christensen is fabulous with her curly questions. And if you follow her on LinkedIn, she's always got great little anecdotes and great questions to share. So another great one. From Jennifer Eggers, we learned about resilience in life, and her stories were extraordinary. I really found them fascinating, and her energy is infectious. Joel Strom was about resilience in business, and I love hearing from leaders who have just made it big in business and how humble and straightforward they can be in sharing their results. And lastly, Adam Moore. I know Adam personally. I love his work. I love his attitude, and it was such a pleasure to bring that to the podcast. So I hope you enjoyed all those episodes. They're all on the backlist, if you like, on my website or on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to. Go and have a listen to some of them if they sparked any of your interest. Overall, there's 3 things I've taken out of this season. One is the importance of questions, because a well-formed question, or any question really, can help expand how we think, how we see, how we perceive the world. And so there is no greater gift than leading with questions, and to lead ourselves with questions, and to pose ourselves questions in our journals. So I think that is such an important thing to consider. And if we pay attention to the quality of our questions, it will definitely uplift the quality of our results. So I'd focus, if you're looking for a key takeaway from the season, I'd say, that was mine. I hope it's yours. I'd actually love to hear what yours are. You can email me at zoe@zoerouth.com. Let me know, or drop a line at LinkedIn or on our Facebook page. The second key takeaway for me was the importance of reflection. In fact, of all the leaders I've interviewed over the last 5 or 6 years or so, the ones that go deeper and further with their work are those that have a deliberate reflective practice. Way back a few seasons ago, we had Promise Phelan, and she spends 5 hours once a month in reflection at a cafe. She just takes her journal out, she poses herself questions, she thinks about what she's experienced, what she's learned along the way. Now, that is some kind of commitment, and she said she learned it from the other astonishing leaders she's had the privilege to be around, such as Tony Robbins and a lot of the high flyers that are in his advanced in some of his programs. So yeah, reflective practice is takeaway number 2. And the third thing is, when we feel like we're getting borne down by the weight of our responsibilities, or we feel like we're struggling for whatever reason, if we just pivot our gaze and focus on others, how much energy that brings us. It is so energizing to be of service to others. And really, that is I think that's my go-to strategy now for getting out of a funk, is how do we do that? How do we uplift ourselves? Just focus on other people and how you can be of service to them. So those are my 3 big takeaways from the past season. A couple of books that I'm playing with, and I guess this is kind of emerging out of the last season as well. Useful Delusion, A More Useful Belief, and a podcast interview I'm about to be interviewed on as a guest called The Big Lie. These are all about the power of the mind to shape our focus through our beliefs and therefore guide our action. So I think it's a key leadership responsibility to turn our gaze to look at our thinking and the stories that we tell ourselves. Are they useful? Are they not? Are they guiding us in the right direction? So this is a well-worn trope in the leadership and personal development space, and yet it's just so important to do that. So how are you going about thinking about your thinking? It's kind of meta, isn't it? But that's the whole thing. This whole podcast and its purpose is about helping you be more meta. I just had a picture in my head of people walking around with t-shirts that say, "Hey, I'm more meta." Yeah. Okay, the other resource I want to point you towards, and I'll put links in the show notes for you, is called the Post-Progressive Post. And it's about how we integrate polarizing politics. It's very American-based, American-centralized, but just substitute Australia wherever it says America, and you've got the same examples and the same concepts there. And that's a really great segue into our topic for this quarter, which is about vertical development. Sounds very cryptic if you haven't come across vertical development before. But really, what vertical development is all about, it's about expanding our perspective. And it has a long history of different theorists that have looked at patterns of behavior, such as Charles Marston, who developed the DISC model. So he looked at patterns of behavior and mapped those. And B.F. Skinner also did the same. So behavioralists were kind of some of the first pioneers to look at the patterns in people behavior. And there have been several theorists from there that have looked at how humans actually show up and how they interact. So different researchers like Walter Clark, like Gert Hofstede, just love that name, Hofstede. Fantastic name. He looked at people from 53 different countries, and he looked at orientations that people had, such as power distance, collectivism versus individualism, femininity versus masculinity, uncertainty, avoidance. So some of these are poles and some of these are polarities. And so he started to look at more complex patterning than what did Charles Marston. Then there was Schwartz, another fantastic name. And he looked at 56 values and 10 different tiers of values. So here we start to see evolutionary patterns in behaviors and orientations and values. His research covered 44 countries and 25,000 people. So a lot of rigorous research has gone into looking at these different patterns. And there's been the work of Robert Quinn, Edgar Schein, Richard Barrett, Daniel Dennison, Diehl Kennedy, O'Reilly, Chapman, and Caldwell. Phew, lots of name dropping there. The one that I'm more familiar with is the work of Clare Graves. And he really pioneered or looked extensively at the pattern of evolving values across societies. And that was documented in the book by Don Beck and Chris Cohen, two of his students, which is a pretty dense book. It's also what I studied when I got certified by Complete Coherence to do values assessments. I'm also certified by the Leadership Maturity Framework to run debriefs of leadership maturity profile. And both of these two models are developmental. Oh my God, I can't even say it. Developmental, there we go, that's it, developmental in nature, which means that we're not typed, we're not categorized and static in the way that we perceive either our values, which is the spiral dynamics Clare Graves works, or our leadership identity, which is the work of, amongst others, Suzanne Cook-Grauder. And between those two patterns we have what we have before us is a pattern of development, a journey that we can follow, a methodology and a practice for expanding our leadership ability by expanding, first of all, what we value, how much we can value and appreciate, and second of all, the kind of worldview that we adopt and the action logic that we take based on that worldview. So vertical development is about moving stages. So both of these models, the values model, the spiral dynamics model, and the leadership maturity framework, have this evolutionary nature to them. And there's a couple of rules that go through the vertical development piece. And the first thing we need to distinguish is what is vertical development versus horizontal development. Horizontal development is consolidating and building skills at a particular stage. So it's consolidating either the perspective, the worldview, or consolidating how our values of that stage. Vertical development is when we transcend that stage and move into a different stage, which includes all of the past values and perspectives of the previous stage and expands them. So it's a transcend and include model, which is very cool. Another way of thinking about it, I love this metaphor too, is that in the human body, there are cells, and then there are tissues, and then there are organs, and then there are bodies, and then there are communities, and then there are nations, and so on. So the cell is nested within all of these patterns, all of these complexities. Is the cell better than a body? No, it's an interdependent piece. All are essential to the other. So a human is essential to a community is essential to a nation is essential to the planet, and hence into the cosmos. So these nested interdependencies are an element of that. And I think this is important to think about because otherwise we start to judge. If we only have one set of values, then we judge that, depending on our point of view, I guess, that's the only set of values that's good, and anybody else's is wrong. And this is very limiting. So the developmental model is meant to increase our capacity to care for and care about different people and stakeholders so that we can be more fluid and responsive in our leadership action. So there's a couple of elements around this vertical development piece. And I'm sort of alluding to the first one, which is more complexity is not necessarily better. Depends how you define better. Better than other people? No. More complexity, being able to navigate more complexity gives us more options. Being able to navigate complexity gives us the opportunity to make decisions and choices that affect, hopefully for the benefit of more people and stakeholders. So being able to hold and value greater perspectives and to navigate complexity has its advantages. It does not make us better people or better humans. And I think we need to value each stage of development, whether it's through our values or through our leadership maturity. Otherwise, we're just judgmental jerks, and nobody wants that. All right, another rule is through each of these stages, and I'm not going to go through each of the stages because it takes me 3 hours to do that in a workshop to unpack the model and then to explain it in terms of people's profiles and so on. I just want to give you the general principle. So as we go through this season of the podcast, you get a sense of what I'm talking about when we talk about different stage shifts. All right. So this particular rule of the developmental model is that as we shift and evolve, we tend to shift our focus from individual focus to collective focus and back again. So we swivel between individual to collective. And each of the stages echoes the earlier one. So as an example, an earlier stage of values development is the red stage. And so in values and spiral dynamics, they have colors attributed to them. And not so in leadership maturity, but there are parallels amongst the two. So in the red stage of values, it's all about power and energy and drive. And it's red, power, passion. And so it's very individually focused. The next stage of values development is around a collective focus because each stage responds to the limitation of the earlier stage. Each stage of development has an upside, a strength, a really important aspect of human evolution. And each stage has a trap to it, a downside, something that holds us back or doesn't have is the shadow side. And so for the red stage, the downside of power and passion is being domineering and dominating and bullish and brutish and egocentric. So yeah, not so good. And it's the excesses of the red that causes us to look for different ways of valuing contributions. And that leads to the blue stage of values, which is all about law, rule, process. And all of that is in response to the excesses of red. And so we bring stability and process and regulation to the excesses of hedonism, which is the red stage. From a leadership maturity point of view, this is going from, I think, it's not a direct parallel, but it's got similar attributes to it. The earlier stages of leadership maturity before you become a leader are opportunist, where you're just looking out for yourself. It's you against the world, and you've got to fight for yourself. It's very self-oriented. Then we swing to the collective, which is all about becoming a diplomat and fitting in and following the rules. So it kind of mirrors the red to blue transition there. So red is about personal power and passion. Blue is about collective rules and being socially minded and structured. And the leadership maturity piece is about moving from opportunist, which is me against the world, me out for myself, lone wolf, to fitting in and obeying social rules and norms. Okay, so that's another tip on the vertical development. Things, your values can shift and change, and your leadership maturity, your sense of ego identity can shift and change too, if things shift and change around you. So often our development is triggered by changes in our context. Example of that is when we are successful as a professional and all of a sudden we get promoted to becoming a manager. And it's like, oh, and this is a transition that many people struggle with because you go from being a successful solo operator, dependent on yourself, your own performance, to then having to steward and lead other people and getting them to do stuff with you, alongside you. And it has this whole new cluster of skills that you need to get a handle of. And that can be really hard work. So that expert to manager phase is something that a lot of leaders really find challenging unless they get support. So if things change, we can change. So what we're seeing in the world right now too, because of the effect of the pandemic, it is really causing some rapid shifts and changes in how people perceive their role as leaders, the need for greater capacity for navigating complexity. And that is catalyzing a shift in leadership maturity to be more inclusive and to be more embracing. So later stages of leadership maturity are being hauled up by their britches, if you like, because of the context. Okay. Now, every level has a downside. We talked about that. Okay. The models hold true at scale. So as we talk about vertical development and going through each of the stages, it's true for the individual, it's true for communities, it's true for organizations, it's true for nations, and it's true of all of humanity. That's the proof of the pattern, I guess. So it's a pretty good map of the territory in terms of how we can expand and include our perspectives. I want to highlight a couple of key stages that I see in working with leaders and that you are likely immersed in yourself. One of them I already mentioned, which is the expert stage. Did I mention that? Yes, I did. So the expert stage is when we grow our skills and abilities and our expertise, and we get a sense of our ego, our sense of identity through that. So for me, for example, my initial stage into the expert stage was learning how to be an outdoor educator and becoming a specialist in canoe tripping in Canada, and then moving to Australia and becoming an outdoor educator and building my expertise across many different areas like bushwalking and rafting and climbing and ropes course. And yay. So my sense of esteem, my sense of self came from all the skills and abilities and experience that I tucked under my belt in that particular field. Then when I was promoted, as an example, to head of training, it was a new set of skills. It's how do I lead my peers? And boy, did I have some challenges there. Whew. Trial by fire. So learning how to lead peers is moving into the achiever stage. So we have the expert stage of leadership maturity, and then this whole new ball game of leading others is the achiever stage. And 80% of leaders sort of fall into this expert achiever stage of leadership maturity. It also has its limitations. The achiever stage, if we're not careful, and this is careful, is something I talk about a lot when I'm talking about amplifiers, is that the limitations of achiever are either cause you to burn out because you keep wanting to do more, do what you know more of, so quicker, faster, better, in order to contend with the complexity, but it's the wrong strategy. So just because you're, and we see this with the leaders that have struggled to deal with COVID. So all they know is linear focus, go hard, play hard, and have a strategy and work it. That didn't work in COVID because we had to just press stop, pause, reorient, and test and experiment new ways of being quickly. So achievers just try to take the same approach and apply it to the new context and have found themselves struggling. And really what we need is the ability to understand and to respond to volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, the VUCA world, as you're probably familiar with. And I add the E, the exponential world. And when we can do that, it allows us to be more nimble. It allows us to surf the wave of change rather than getting dumped by it. So the next shift away from, so achiever, we kind of reach a ceiling where we go, is this all there is? Set goals, climb a mountain, get to the mountain, repeat? No. So the next stage, which is prompted by either a shift in context, like the pandemic, or because we reached the ceiling of disdain, we're like, ugh, I'm over this achieving stuff. There must be a new way to experience life. And as soon as we start asking those kinds of questions, like, is this all there is? I'm really burnt out. I need to find a new way of being. We know that we're on the cusp of change. And the change is a vertical one. And the shift to the next stage in the leadership maturity model is called individualist. And the individualist, we've swung from the individual focus of the expert to the collective of the achiever. We swing back again to the individual focus of the individualist. And this is where we discover people have different points of view. We discovered that everybody has their own version of the truth and that people have amazing stories to tell, and that isn't the world an amazing box of chocolates? And the more different chocolates we have in there, the better the experience. So we become really interested in bringing people, all sorts of different perspectives to the table, because we suddenly start to see the world experience, the human experience, the work experience as a kaleidoscope, a rainbow, a multiplicity with infinite numbers of possibilities. And this is incredibly exciting, as well as incredibly befuddling. Befuddling because with so many different versions of the truth, how do you get to one truth? So the other aspects that characterize this stage of leadership maturity, which is called the individualist stage, and it has its echo in the values model to being the green stage, which is all about social concerns, is that we see the rise of civil rights, we see the rise of diversity and inclusion, we see the rise of environmentalism. So really looking at causes beyond our immediate circle to a broader, more complex patterned world that we seek to be stewards of. It's a very exciting stage. And not that many leaders are there. And it's my intention with my group amplifiers is to uplift the capability of leaders in the room, and the virtual room as well as the physical room, so that they are able to contend with the complexity that's facing them. So we need leaders to be at individualist stage and beyond to really be able to respond to the circumstances that the world is giving us and that we've created as a collective. So we need to catch up to our own evolution in some ways. The next stage, and the last one that I'll talk about today, is the strategist stage. So it is in response to the limitations of the individualist. The individualist stage, or the green stage in the values model, can be blind to its own paradoxes. Because we see at individual stage that everyone is equal, that in itself is a hierarchy. Everyone's equal, and therefore that's a better way of seeing the world than any other way. So you can see, like, be equal, and if you don't believe we're equal, then that's not good. So this is good, this is bad, is a blind spot for us at individualist stage. The other aspects of individualist which are problematic is that it takes so darn long to make decisions because we need to make sure everyone's included, everyone's consulted, and that everyone has buy-in. I mean, everyone means everyone. And so it makes it difficult for us to take a stand and to take action if that is our process and our focus. Right. So individualist stage and its limitations moves us towards strategist. On the values model, that is the yellow stage of innovation. And at strategist, we can start to see the system and how we play a part in the system. We become very concerned about how we show up as part of the system. So this deep self-awareness and focusing on deep self-discovery is a signpost of that. And hence why I'm encouraging you to start interrogating your own thinking. So some of the tips and a lot of the models that we're showing through this podcast are really at these later stages, individualist and strategist, and quite a lot at achiever as well. So as we go through the interviews and as we share concepts, try and locate where you are going well in each of the stages and where you are being challenged, where you don't feel quite, you haven't quite grasped it. That's cool because that shows that you are on the edge of development. And development, hey, it's tricky. There's 3 things that we need for development. We need, first of all, the willingness to do the work, because it is work. It's hard to confront our own way of thinking and being and see the limitations of it as well as the strengths and then move into the next stage. It's very destabilizing. That sense of disequilibrium, another great word, and being off balance is the nature of vertical development. And so it takes a willingness to do the work, some courage to do it. There also needs to be the need to do it. If our context doesn't change, there is not necessarily an evolutionary push to do anything different. So if you find yourself happy as Larry and doing what you're doing, good for you. Vertical development or horizontal development does not necessarily equate to happiness. So choose your happiness along the journey, but don't expect vertical development to deliver you either success or happiness. Those are things that you need to characterize and choose for yourself along the way. And the third thing you need for vertical development is support. This is tough work, and it takes a lot to unpack some of these concepts. And so going it with other people is the best way to go about doing that. All right, so that's a little bit of a taster of some of the ideas around vertical development. We've got some amazing interviews coming up. We've got Paul Hargreaves, who is the author of The Dirty Word, which is all about how a CEO discovered process in order to liberate creativity and himself from the achiever trap. It's a great interview. And we've got Carol Sanford. Oh my goodness, what a gem she is. And her focus on being regenerative. This is advanced leadership thinking, and her books are quite profound. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy that. That's 2 of the ones that and then we've got Brian Emerson, who's the author of the Polarity book that we looked at last season in Amplifiers. Great conversation about, again, a tool for advanced leadership thinking. And Jeff Korsnick, who wrote a great book about social reform that businesses can participate in by hiring felons. Such an important conversation, such great insights. So that's all coming up in this next season of the podcast. All right, so we're winding up a little bit. I guess if you want to have a chat with me, go for it. Find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me at zoerouth.com. That's Z-O-E Routh, like mouth with an R.com. I would love it if you rated or reviewed the podcast. It is really helping us expand our reach and get these concepts into the hands and ears of people who need them and will benefit from them. So I'm so grateful for every rating and review that we get on the show. Don't forget about the free report. That's at zoerouth.com. Click on resources and download it. It's how to spot and handle difficult behaviors in the workplace. Hey, in the meantime, you know what? Live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast with leadership expert Zoe Routh. For more about people stuff and to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.